ship lurched violently. The sound of retching filled the air as the stench of sickness, sweat, and rotting flesh clung to the damp wooden walls. Men and women, shackled in rusted iron chains, lay crammed together like animals, their bodies frail, their eyes hollow. A young boy coughed violently. Blood. A woman next to him whispered, "He won't last the night." Then, a splash. The boy's body was tossed overboard. Another life lost. But no one mourned. No one even reacted. Death was just part of the journey. For these prisoners, this wasn't an adventure. It was a death sentence. They weren't explorers. They weren't settlers. They were convicts, banished from Britain to an unknown land, a place no one had seen before. A land that would either kill them or force them to become something else entirely. This is the story of how Australia was built, on chains, blood, and survival. The year was 1787. Britain had a problem. Too many criminals, not enough prisons. The streets of London were overrun with thieves, beggars, and the desperate. Pickpockets, con men, even those who stole a loaf of bread. All were crammed into overflowing jails. Disease spread like wildfire. The prisons became death traps, festering with filth and despair. Britain needed a solution, fast, and they found it, 8,000 miles away. A land no one really understood. Harsh, isolated, unforgiving, Australia. But there was a problem. No one wanted to go, so Britain decided they wouldn't send settlers, they would send prisoners. The plan was simple: load up the criminals, ship them to this strange and distant land, and let them fend for themselves. It was called transportation, a one-way ticket to exile. The first fleet set sail in May 1787, 11 ships carrying over 700 convicts, alongside officers, marines, and supplies. For 8 months, they endured hell on the ocean. Food was scarce. Rats and insects infested the decks. Those who got sick were left to die. Some were thrown overboard. Others took their last breath in chains. And yet, those who survived weren't prepared for what awaited them. Because when they finally arrived, Australia wasn't what they expected. It was worse. January 1788. After 8 months at sea, the first fleet finally arrived at Botany Bay. But the moment they set foot on shore, they knew something was wrong. The land was nothing like Britain. Scorching heat, endless wilderness, and an eerie silence. And worse, they weren't alone. For over 60,000 years, the land had been home to the indigenous Australians, a people who understood its dangers, its power. But the British saw them as an obstacle, and soon, violence would follow. As for the convicts, they expected shelter, they expected food. Instead, they got nothing. There were no buildings, no roads, no farms. They had to build everything from scratch. And the British officers, they didn't see convicts as people. They saw them as labor. No food until you work. No water until you obey. No mercy if you fail. If a convict stole food, they were whipped. If they tried to escape, they were hunted down. And if they fought back, they were hanged. The colony was starving. The crops wouldn't grow. The supplies were running out. The officers ate first. The convicts got the scraps, if there were any left. For some, the hunger was too much. They turned to something unthinkable. Desperate whispers filled the night. Convicts disappeared into the darkness. Days later, their bodies were found, or at least what was left of them, because some had resorted to eating human flesh. Australia had become a prison without walls, but there was no escape. And the worst was yet to come. The first months in Australia were worse than the journey itself. The settlers had arrived in a land they didn't understand. The soil was dry and unyielding. The crops they planted refused to grow. Fresh water was scarce. And the hunger, it gnawed at them like a slow, creeping death. Convicts were forced to build the colony from nothing, but with barely any food or tools. Many simply collapsed from exhaustion. Punishments were brutal. A single stolen loaf of bread meant 100 lashes. Some tried to escape, but where would they go? The wilderness was endless. Deadly snakes slithered through the grass. Spiders the size of a man's hand lurked in the shadows. Even the water was dangerous. Sharks patrolled the coastline, waiting for the desperate. And there was another danger. The people who had already lived here for 60,000 years. The indigenous Australians watched from the trees, their dark eyes unreadable. They knew this land. They understood its power. The British? They saw them as savages. Tensions exploded. Raids, clashes, and retaliations turned into a full-scale conflict. Convicts weren't just fighting to survive against the land. They were fighting for survival against the people who had lived there long before them. This was no longer just a prison colony. This was a war zone. The years dragged on. Some convicts died as prisoners, their names lost to history, but others, they became something else entirely. Over time, convicts who had served their sentences were granted freedom. Some stayed, becoming farmers, traders, even leaders. And some wanted revenge. They had been brutalized, starved and beaten. They had been whipped, chained, and left to rot. Now they had power. In the years that followed, rebellions broke out. Convicts turned against their captors. The British Empire had sent them here as prisoners, but now they were becoming a new people entirely. They weren't just criminals anymore. They were Australians. And slowly, the prison colony began to transform. Farms flourished, towns grew, roads stretched across the land. But beneath it all, one thing remained unspoken. The land they had taken was never truly theirs. The indigenous people had been pushed from their own home. Some resisted, some fought back. Thousands would die in the conflicts that followed. And the scars of that history, they still run deep today. Australia was built on survival, on blood, on suffering, on a desperate fight against the land, against the British, against each other. But was it truly colonization? Or was it something darker? What do you think? Was Australia built on resilience or on brutality? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more dark, untold stories from history, subscribe and hit the like button, because the past is filled with shadows, and we're just getting started.